Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. This illuminating documentary film, Obsessed with Light, is a meditation on light and the enduring obsession to create. The film pulls back the curtain on Louis Fulmer, a wildly original performer who revolutionized the visual culture of the early 20th century. The film creates a dialogue between the past and the present as it delves into the astonishing influence that Fuller's work has had on contemporary artists. The American creator of modern dance, Fuller invented a completely new kind of spectacle, which combined dance, fabric, and movement. We're fortunate to have with us today the co-directors of Obsessed with Light, Sabine, Krayenbühl, and Zeva Oelbaum. Welcome to the program.
Yes, thank you. We're happy to be with you and talk about Louis and the film.
Yeah, it's again, beautiful film on different levels. The fact that we get to see the dances, the artistry of her work, in addition to seeing so many of the people who have come to know her and been influenced by her, to see their work as well and what the influence was and how it impacted them is just terrific. What was the impetus to move forward with this particular documentary film?
We're interested in stories about women that have been forgotten in history. Our previous film, Letters from Baghdad, was about a very influential archaeologist, diplomat, English woman who traveled the Middle East and was her name was Gertrude Bell. And so we are always on the lookout for these type of stories. And we came across a clip of the Serpentine dance as I was working on a film, editing another film. And it was so astonishing and mesmerizing and in color, hand tinted. And we were wondering who is behind this clip and who created this. And so we came across Louis Fuller and started to dig more.
One of the things that really was quite fascinating for us in the broadest sense, it was really how someone from over a century ago who sort of mesmerized her audiences at that time has continued to influence and inspire artists today. And so we sort of put that question at the very beginning of the film. As she says, what is magic? What is it about her performance and her creation and her innovations that had such enduring power? So that's one of the things that sort of inspired us to make the film, among many other things that inspired us.
Let's go back to the time and place where she came from. She was born in the 1800s. Let's start there. Where was Marie Louise Fuller born?
She was born in a small city outside Chicago, Fullersburg. And yeah, she was this very fun and a little eccentric girl growing up, and her father was a musician. And so she really got an early start in, let's say, in the performing arts.
That her ancestors, I mean, not even that far back, but her great uncle, they were homesteaders and they came from upstate New York to this area outside Chicago, founded this little town. Fullersburg was named after her family, and she was born during the Civil War. And her ancestors had fought in the American Revolutionary War.
Wow.
So you have someone with this incredibly American background who moves to Paris and becomes the embodiment of Art Nouveau and iconic in the Belle Epoque.
In terms of her interest, the beginning of her interest in dance, let's talk a little bit about sort of where she got the inspiration to start dancing. And I want to also, at the very outset of this conversation, I want to emphasize that she didn't necessarily see herself as a dancer. She has this very interesting and forward-thinking outlook on her artistry, on what she was about as an artist. She seemed to have a grasp of some looking for more, trying to get more out of what it was that she had in her mind as a vision for what she wanted to do. But I think I'm being fair when I say she didn't see herself simply as a dancer, and that was almost from the outset. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Um,
Yeah, Zeva, you're gonna.
Go ahead.
Loie Fuller viewed herself as an actress.
Yeah.
She was very motivated from day one, and she fell into dance because she was playing a character in one play, and she ended up sort of twirling around with this very long costume, and the audience really responded. And Loie Fuller was very, very um, smart and intuitive and understood the idea of getting a response from an audience, which is really what it's all about. And so gradually she sort of evolved into a dancer. And what sort of propelled her was her curiosity to see how using sticks and fabric and lights and color could be combined into a spectacle. But it wasn't what she set out to do originally.
Well, Sabina, she was inspired, it seems, in the film it's referred to as a particular dress that she learned of, or is that right? I've got that right? It's a
Yeah, it's she has a lot of different stories.
oh,
This is a reoccurring one or recurring one that she received from an Indian officer, some piece of cloth that was this very fine silk, and she started experimenting with it. But that's sort of the fun thing, and that's a part of her character. She really, there were all these different ways that she was talking about how she came to the serpentine dance, and it's part of her nature, and I think it's part of an artist's nature to be influenced and sort of get the inspiration from different sources. Sometimes you may know where they come from, and other times they are more intuitive. So in her case, yes, there were, but the Indian officer that gave her the silk is certainly something recurring. And also the Notch dance was something that influenced her. And frequently she would say that, but they were inspired by the dervishes. So it's all these different elements and these different, inspirations that came together for her.
and that's one of the things that I found interesting about her as well, that she was always looking for more inspiration. She was looking to other artists and to cultures and places she had been and where she felt that inspiration. And she tried to translate that into something that would work for her as an artist. And just as you're describing, whether she actually got this particular idea for the serpentine dance or not from some particular place, it became her signature dance. It's really, is it fair to say that's what launched her into the career that she ended up having?
Sure. As Sabina said, she gathered different influences from different cultures. And one story in particular is really very definitive in terms of that, her outreach to Marie and Pierre Curie, because she heard about their invention, their discovery of radium, and wanted to know how it might be how it might work if she were to use radium to make her costumes glow in the dark.
Yeah.
And she also went to Thomas Edison and was inspired by X-rays and worked with phosphorescent salts and had a scientific lab behind her house in Paris where she sort of explored these different questions. And what was really one of the things that catapulted her into really worldwide fame was the 1900 Paris Exposition because it was celebrating the combination in at the turn of the century of art and technology. And Loie Fuller had her own theater where she performed, and it was she was a very iconic example at that fair of the combination of art and technology.
It's a fascinating period of time in the world. For me, one of the more interesting periods is the 1890s in France, in Paris. This seemed to have been in kind of a place where there was a lot of artists involved in doing a lot of very interesting things that seemed to have been kind of an incubator for so much. And then in the early part of the 20th century here in the United States, as we've developed, the French were initially the people who essentially perfected movies and movie cameras, but the United States, here we became purveyors of, some of the greatest artists of all time came from here. And so there's this combination, swirl of these technologies and these artists coming together. And this is where you mentioned Edison. I think that's what's so fascinating about her work is the title of the film, Obsessed with Light, and how important light is and how underappreciated it is in terms of the impact it has on art and on our lives. And that comes through in the film. That's another part of this. It's about Loie Fuller, but it's also an appreciation for light, appreciation for what it brings to our lives, and the artists who are able to use it to do what I just described is just absolutely gorgeous. It really is. And the fact that she was in the forefront of all of this, I just find that period of time interesting and to learn more about. I'm always fascinated when I learn more about that period of time in human history and the impact it had on these people that have become icons in so many ways. That's another part of this film, Obsessed with Light. It is about a lot of different elements that were a part of her life, but we see in the film. Absolutely stunning. Now let's talk about light in terms of you alluded to it with the Edison, Zeva, her work with him. For you as filmmakers making the film and approaching the different people we see in it to hear their perspective on how important that is in their artistry. Let's talk about that part of the film, that the importance of light and why it resonates with so many different artists.
We approach different, what fascinated us was obviously all these, how her iconic dance permeated into the contemporary cultural landscape of today. And so many artists from stage design, this lighting designers such as Jennifer Tipton, who really talks about the importance of light as something that is not just, it has a mysterious quality to it, but it's also, we don't really see it unless it's reflected. And that is really where Loie comes in. She really grasped that right away and used her costume as a reflecting board, as something where the different colored light rays could bounce off. And Robert Wilson, who is obviously, light for him is the key ingredient to everything that he does. And so it really goes from let's say people that have to do with the stage, but then it's also how the light interacts with clothes, with a piece of clothing in general, and more precisely than in fashion. Yeah, it's a very important aspect for any artist, but in particular for the artists that we found were in their own way inspired and fascinated by Loie Fuller.
Yeah, and Ziva, it's the artists like you mentioned, Robert August and others we see in the film. But let's talk about the impact that she had on fashion. I thought that was a really another art form where we see her her influence, her impact on that. We see that in the different different clothes and the shows that we see in the film. That's a surprise to me, but it also makes sense having watched the film.
Yes, that was one unexpected thing that we discovered as well. We were not really, I mean, I wouldn't say we weren't prepared, but it was like this extra fantastic connection between fashion designers and very innovative and fashion designers known for their innovation, like Iris Van Herpen and also Dior, to be inspired by Loie Fuller. We were so excited actually by that. And you can see that it makes sense because Loie Fuller's costume, her silk, her use of silk and the flowingness and how um, as one of our interviewees, as Maite Marcos says, who is a choreographer for Shakira, Loie Fuller made the costume and the dance work with her body type
Yeah.
instead of trying to force her body type into a dance
Yeah.
or a costume. So it's just fantastic. And Alexander McQueen, Loie Fuller's work has inspired lots and lots of amazing fashion designers.
Absolutely. One of the most important parts of the story of Loie Fuller is that she was a woman at a time when to be an entrepreneur, a guider of your own career, someone who charted their own path, who lived in a way that would not have been very acceptable to many people. She did. She did all of those things. And I think that at the end of the day, she seemed to live the life and she had the career more or less that she sought. That,
Yes, she was unapologetic. I mean, she really, for her, and she was a workaholic. So for her, her work, it was the most important thing, and everything else was less important, or she didn't really care what people thought of her. So she was informed by this drive that to create work and, found people along the way that were supportive and she had this long-term relationship with Gab Block, which was part of her being. It didn't, Gab was the one that was more involved. I mean, there was a very big community of gay women, socialites, and artists. And Gab was more involved in that than Loie. Loie was really the school and her her muses and her work was what drove her.
again, my appreciation to you both for bringing all of her life to my attention. And one last thing, which is I'm so glad that Cherry Jones you picked to be the voice of Loie throughout the film. I think she's just it just fit beautifully to me.
We spent a lot of time thinking about the voice, and when we knew that we wanted someone with a mature, sort of earthy,
Yeah.
uh, warm voice, and Sherry Jones was absolutely perfect. She really inhabits Loie Fuller to a T, and we were incredibly thrilled and to be able to work with her, and she did a brilliant job.
She did. I thought she was great. I just saw Raoul Peck's documentary film about Ernest Cole, and he used Lakeith Stanfield is the voice of Ernest Cole, and it's very much like in your film Obsessed with Light. It takes the film and the film subject out of kind of a talking heads environment and puts it right in front of us in terms of hearing their voice. Then I put quotes around hearing, but hearing what their thoughts were, how they felt. It really adds a lot to the film, bringing you into her story. So I'm so glad you did that.
Thank you so much. We really
Yeah,
appreciate speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you. Again, the film is called Obsessed with Light. So be looking for Obsessed with Light. It is a wonderful, wonderful piece of work. So to both of you, thank you, Sabine Krayenbühl, as well as Zeva Oelbaum, for your work on this film, and look forward to more. Hope you come back and join us again.
Thank you,
you so
Mike.
much.
Thank you very much.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.